Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. In the wake of the coronavirus outbreak, work from home culture is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. But what has that meant with respect to data storage and data security and data management solutions? Well, to share his take, tonight on the show I'm joined by a very special guest, the Senior Vice President of Global Sales and Sales Operations with Seagate, BS Teh. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, for sake of some context setting, what do you consider to be some of the most daunting data management challenges in this day and age, and perhaps the future challenges that the industry has yet to fully anticipate?
Well, as the saying goes, data is like oil today, right? It is incredibly valuable, and how valuable it is really the industry and the company's abilities to really use the data. The challenges that we face in today's world as far as data storage is concerned is a number of things. Firstly, studies have shown that only 32% of all data that's being generated is actually usable today. Enterprises are generating about 42% growth in data every single year. But despite that, they're only today able to use about 32% of that. Imagine 68% of the data is practically useless, right? Now, studies have also shown that the more data that we have and the more we're able to harness that, it actually has tremendous benefits to the company's profits, the company's customer satisfaction, the company's ability to launch new products and services to the market better, and therefore, really having a more successful business. So the challenges that we have today really are, number one, how do we actually harness more of that data? Secondly, with the increased amount of the data, how do we store all of them? Thirdly, how do we actually move the data across the different silos that it actually resides in? Fourthly, how do we secure the data? These are tremendous challenges that all enterprises are facing today.
Now, as you just alluded to, most enterprises typically put to use only a fraction of the data that's made available to them. And largely, the balance amount goes untapped entirely. So that said, what are some of the hurdles that enterprises typically encounter in their efforts to harness this data?
Some of the major issues that companies are facing is one, the growth of the data. I had referenced earlier that enterprises are growing their data generation by more than 42% every single year. This is immense, right? This is really a doubling of the amount of data that's being generated. Secondly, where the data is being stored right now is really, what we call sprawled across the data sphere. It's not just being stored in one location right now. It's stored in multiple locations. And this really makes management of the data extremely difficult. In addition to that, right, because of the different locations that the data is being stored, when you want to actually use the data, you have to make sure that the data is able to move from one location to another. Now, how do you actually do that? And more importantly, how do you ensure the security of the data when the data is in motion is really going to be critical. So I think what is missing right now from our perspective is what we call data operations or data ops. Data ops is really merging, right, or connecting, I should say, right, the data creators with the data consumer. So essentially, where the data is being generated and created, right, and how do you then bridge that to people who are actually using the data and therefore making that really functional and usable?
Data ops, as you just mentioned, is essentially a domain that Seagate has very much championed. It's a discipline that it has championed through and through the organization and the industry at large. But what does the evidence indicate in terms of how data ops ties back to better business outcomes?
The more data you have, the more intelligent, right? Your processes are. I think Google has a famous saying, right? It's not that they're more intelligent today, right? Is that we have more data today that allows us to really understand things a lot better. So this is really what data operations or data ops is really all about. Is how do you ensure that all of the data or more and more of the data that's being created becomes usable by the data consumers. Studies have shown, right, companies who actually use more of this data has shown to be more profitable. They grow faster. They're able to provide better customer service because they understand their customers better.
And so the Rethink Data report is, of course, an authority of sorts in this sector, and it's one of the most widely respected publications in the data management domain. What are some of the takeaways that have emerged from this year's edition that have perhaps taken you by surprise?
I would say that yes, the Rethink Data report is really very, very impactful, and we believe that it's really one of the more important studies in data storage this year. I think one of the big surprises to us is that one is 68% of the data that's being generated is actually not used at all, right? For various reasons, whether it's because it's not being able to be collected, or it's not being able to be processed, or because it's not being able to be moved, right? And the Rethink Data report really interviews about 1,500 CIOs and business leaders throughout the world. And the consensus, right, is that the more data that they're able to harness and they're able to use, it really leads to better business outcomes. So that is really not a surprise, but really where the surprise is the amount of data that's not being used and the challenges that are facing business leaders today in terms of how they actually harness the data that they are actually generating.
Studies indicate that the volume of data that is expected to migrate from the edge to the core will soon grow multifold. What sort of new age industry opportunities are likely to bubble to the surface as a result?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think in the past, we have an architecture where there's the endpoint where you generate the data and you store the data, whether where you actually generate it or you store it in the data center. But because of the need to really have low latency or immediate response or feedback or analytics, right? That's the proliferation of the edge. And what we're seeing right now more and more is that more data is being generated and stored on the edge. And more importantly, there's a lot more data. About 57% of the data is going to be moved between the edge and the cloud. Now, what are the business opportunities as well as the challenges? Well, when you move data, security is first and foremost, the most important, right? You want to make sure that the data is secure when it leaves one location and that the data is secure when it actually arrives at the other location. Secondly, is the speed. When you move the data across the airwaves or across fiber, it takes a lot of time, right? And thirdly, is the cost involved in moving data. So we believe that across all of these business opportunities to address and to solve these challenges.
And for companies that are perhaps struggling to put more time, energy, or resources towards their data management strategies, particularly in the global health crisis we currently find ourselves in now, what words of advice might you have for them?
Our advice really is to really take this as a higher level priority, right? Regardless of what the economic environment is or the whether there's the global pandemic, right? Certain fundamentals need to be addressed, and we believe that data management is a very key fundamental that companies need to address because the amount of benefit that you derive from managing your data and from managing, meaning storing as well as making more data usable, really would have a lot more benefits to the corporations. So our advice really would be to move this up much higher in terms of a company's priorities And then secondly, right, really seriously look at the data ops function to ensure that you're really able to manage your data effectively. Data storage is across the entire spectrum, right, from the endpoint to the edge and to the data center, so to the cloud, right? And there's no question that the proliferation of data continues on. The pandemic is not slowing that down in any way.
Now, I'd like to take the conversation a bit closer to home. In reviewing the Rethink data report that has emerged this year, to what extent do the findings hold relevant for the Indian ecosystem?
Well, the Indian ecosystem, as we looked at the survey results, is actually not too different from what we see worldwide. There are certain differences, like, for example, security in India is a far higher priority. Secondly, there's a lot more optimism. About 74% of the respondents actually feel confident that in the next 2 years, the situation is going to be much improved from where it is today. And in fact, there's a lot of optimism that things today, while not very satisfactory, are also much improved from before. So we feel very confident that India is definitely not behind any of the other regions in the world. In fact, we believe that India is probably leading in terms of the generation of data. India is actually ahead of the global average, generating more than 45% of data every year, as opposed to the global average of 42%.
And if you were to evaluate India's data management landscape with respect to its existing data protection, data backup, and data recovery solutions, what do you identify as some of the unique plus points and pain points specific to this market?
I think one of the pain points that the Indian companies do face is infrastructure. I would say that in general, that is still a challenge, although that is much improved from before. So I believe that that's going to be a key factor in how quickly companies in India are able to really take advantage of the situation here. In terms of the opportunities and the strengths, I think there's a lot of talent in India, especially on the technical side of things. And secondly, if you look at it, the opportunities for growth are one of the most exciting in the world. I mean, given the size of the market and the population and the size of the market where it is today, we see tremendous opportunities for growth. And I think a lot of companies in India can really take advantage of that. So you're really having a situation which is really very enviable. One is you've got a market that's ready for explosive growth. I had mentioned earlier about the fact that the respondents have said that the growth of data in India is faster than the global average. Secondly, you've got immense talent in India that really would be able to help yield a lot of these benefits. And thirdly, you've got opportunities for improvement. And you've already seen momentum of the infrastructure and the management in this space improve over the past 2 years, according to the surveys, and a lot of optimism that there's going to be more improvement over the next 2 years.
Now, as data management strategies become more sophisticated, what sort of skill sets have become the most sought after amongst professionals in this space?
I think there's several. I think I have mentioned earlier. I think security is first and foremost on people's minds when it comes to managing data. So that's really going to be very, very critical. I think the second really would be storage management software and skills, and that's really about the ability to take all kinds of data and translating them into usable formats, right? And so that's going to be a very, very critical and an exciting space as well. And there's going to be growth opportunities there.
And if you were to put into tangible terms the very measurable benefits of a sound data management strategy, how would you categorize them and how would you rank them in terms of time savings, in terms of cost savings, in terms of operational efficiency, so on and so forth?
Well, the survey, the Rethink data survey, does not really did not really go into the specific dollars of investments in terms of recommendation or what that would yield in terms of benefits, because it would be actually quite different depending on what industry you're in. But suffice to say, I think it is going to be significant in terms of the benefit to the company, in terms of the business outcomes that you're going to be able to have for sure. And of course, the extent of the business outcome improvement that you have, really, I would say that directly correlates to your ability to harness the data that's available.
Now, certain sectors have, of course, weathered the pandemic fairly well, versus others have, of course, fallen to the wayside. Where does data storage and data management fall into this equation?
In general, what we see is there's no abatement to really the need to store data and the need to generate data. Where we see there are differences because data storage is across the entire spectrum, right, from the endpoint to the edge and to the data center, so to the cloud. Right, and there's no question that the proliferation of data continues on. The pandemic is not slowing that down in any way. However, because of the pandemic, we do see slowdown in certain segments of the market. But then, on the other hand, in other segments of the market, like the cloud, for instance, that remains very robust and very strong for us. However, in the longer term, we believe that the growth and the opportunities in data storage, will continue and will not be impacted by the pandemic.
And I have to ask, of course, how do you believe India fits into Seagate's future growth plans and growth story, not just now, but to the extent of decades into the future?
India is a very exciting market for Seagate on two fronts. One, obviously, it's an important market today. It's a very sizable market, but it's large, really more in the consumer space and some of the consumer markets. We believe that there is a tremendous opportunity for India to grow in the enterprise and the cloud space as well. And I think that that's really more only starting to really take shape. I would say that market for enterprise and cloud is more nascent at this point in time, although it's starting to grow and to show a lot of promise. And because of that, that makes India a very exciting and strategic market for Seagate.
For startups and small businesses that may be watching, who are considering a pivoting or entering this space in some capacity, how would you guide them? What might your words of wisdom be?
Well, our advice to a lot of these companies are really to have an awareness and understanding of your data strategy, and really, and understanding the data strategy is to really understand how are you really capturing the data, and how are you storing the data, and how are you managing the data. Because at the start of the call earlier, I said that data is like oil or like gold, right? It is that important in our perspective, and many of the respondents as well. It is absolutely critical and will be highly impactful for business outcome.
So thank you once again for the candid speak and for taking the time to speak to us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow.
Thank you very much, and once again, thank you for having me.